like me to go first since I'm next to you on the screen?
For Jane Unchained here with the Boycott Me Coalition, and we've got a high-powered group. Joe Enriquez, or Joe Enriquez Henry, as he's also called, is our lone man, but he is the former of the Boycott Me Coalition through Forward Latino and other organizations based out of Iowa. But we're going to go first to Laura Montonye Reese. You are doing extraordinary things. Laura, tell us about some of your campaigns.
Well, I'm co-faunder of Agriculture Fairness Alliance, which is a 501c4 lobbying group, and we focus on DC. We're pushing legislation at the moment to help farmers transition. It's called At-Risk Farmer Act. And also co-founder of Vegan Justice League, where we're doing the research to expose the corruption in the food system and show how the food system needs fixing. And that informs the lobbying of AFA. And in the past couple months, we've done a few articles on slaughterhouse workers and highlighting how working in the meatpacking industry is horrendous for workers, and we stand in solidarity with them.
That's incredible. And isn't there also legislation that you are involved with that would have a significant impact on this as we push our Boycott Me Coalition? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, the specific legislation that we are lobbying for is called At-Risk Farmer, and it's to give grants to farmers who want to transition from animal farming, and that can be all the way up to meat packing, to go to plant farming and plant-based food production in that supply chain. And the idea is that we've met quite a few farmers who are interested in the idea, but obviously the transition costs can seem insurmountable. And so we think that for so many reasons that we need to transition from a meat-based food system to a plant-based food system, from environmental to workers' rights to food equity to just fairness and health too. We think there's a role for the federal government to play in greasing those skids so that any farmer who wants to can go from producing animal protein to, say, plant protein. They can still farm. It's just a transition, and to make it easy. So this legislation would fund nonprofits that focus on transitioning farmers, like Renee King-Sonnen's Rancher Advocacy Program or the Transformation Program, or it could just fund farmers directly, and they would hire somebody to do the reporting that's necessary because it's a pilot program. And the idea is we establish this and then it expands. And it could fit in really well with Cory Booker's FSRA legislation that's gaining traction now. That's for sort of bigger factory farms and transitioning those. So this would be a first step toward that.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker have proposed a bill to shut down large-scale factory farming. And this is something that we absolutely need. The deadline is very, very far away. But done beats perfect. At least they're proposing something, which is a breakthrough. And by the way, I think it's really important to take a look at, these are today's modern day industrial concentrated animal feeding operations. Does this look like a farm to you? These animals live in these giant sheds, sometimes 100,000 per. They do not see the sky. They do not touch grass. And they've been likened to other horrors in history. You can figure out which ones. This is truly morally abhorrent. All you have to do is take a look at this and say, wow, this is morally wrong. It doesn't take a theologian to realize that. So as we try to transition, let me ask you, Heather Dahman, you are with the Vegan Academy and you work to help people transition to veganism. We're talking about two things here. We're talking about getting consumers to transition to plant-based, whether it's for worker solidarity because these workers are dying in these COVID-riddled slaughterhouses, or whether it's for their own health. And then we're also talking about helping so-called farmers, who are really warehouse operators in today's world, get out of their terrible situation, which is probably a lot harder than consumers just making a decision to switch to plant-based. But you know what? Even though it's easy, obviously we have our work cut out for us, Heather.
Right. And when I went vegan, probably about 11 years ago, I had no clue what to eat. You grow up eating a certain way, and especially with farmers and slaughterhouse workers, they only know, mostly eating meat. So I want to help people learn how to eat more plants, what to do to replace the meat in your diet. You don't have to eat meat. You can eat beans. You can eat meat substitutes. There's other proteins. You can get protein from plants. So when transitioning away from meat, when you're boycotting meat, we want to show people how easy it is, how delicious it is to eat a plant-based diet for whatever reason. It's healthier, it's more ethical for the animals, it's better for the environment, and it's better for the workers that are in the slaughterhouses right now.
Now, I want to also show you this. Check this out. This is something that Woodstock Animal Sanctuary just issued. Call out to animal farms who would be willing to surrender some animals instead of killing them on site because of slaughterhouse closings or decreases in their market. We are working with a coalition of farm sanctuaries to try to save some lives. Please email us at farmoutreach@woodstocksanctuary.org. So this, I think, Victoria Moran of the Main Street Vegan Academy is another aspect of the problem. This is a process, not an event. I mean, this is a complicated process to wean our culture off of this most destructive product in existence. And what's left behind, or who are left behind, are literally billions of animals that are caught up in the system right now in bottlenecks. And the farmers in quotes, the warehouse operators, are finding they have to depopulate the animals themselves, which is causing a lot of, I would say, heartache to some of these farmers. It's a lot easier to wave goodbye to a bunch of pigs or chickens getting into a truck. It's a lot more difficult to kill them yourselves with gassing, which is the furthest thing from euthanasia you could possibly imagine. Some of the most horrific footage I've ever seen.
Well, I think we're all compartmentalized. Just like the person going into the supermarket isn't thinking about the slaughterhouse, the farmers probably are not thinking about the slaughterhouse either. I remember a day I spent in a slaughterhouse in rural Missouri, and at the end of the day, a farmer drove up with 4 cows. I think there were 4 of them, and he just took off back down the road. But you could tell that he'd had communication with these cows. These cows trusted people. And to see that betrayal at the end of their lives was so sad. He knew it was coming. He didn't want to see it. But the cool thing is that as consumers want to change, as we do what Heather talked about, getting people interested in eating plants and more plant-based protein, this is going to gradually happen. And wonderful heroes like Woodstock Farm Sanctuary can step up and certainly save some of these lives. And in the big picture, over time, we will become a world that doesn't raise animals for food.
And I'm showing some of the posters that have been put up by the Boycott Meat Coalition, because one of the reasons that the coalition got started is because slaughterhouse workers are dying. And I just want to show one particularly poignant image of a slaughterhouse worker. There she is. This is what happens to COVID-19 patients who suffer the worst consequences. There she is in the hospital. Is a chicken wing worth putting this woman in this terrible situation? Is a slice of bacon worth putting this woman in that terrible situation? These are not essential workers. And I would like you, if you could, Laura, to address that, because those who are not inspired to change because of any number of issues, animal cruelty, climate change, animal agriculture's massive contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, habitat destruction, wildlife extinction, human world hunger, maybe when they see a person suffering like this, they might say, maybe I should think twice about ordering that meat dish.
Yeah, I mean, the way we talk about it, my co-founder Connie and I, we talk about this quite a lot, and it's all connected. It's the human element and the animal element, and you can't divorce one from the other. And the reality is the food system is from top to bottom just unfair to consumers, to workers. And we're all in this fight together to make it fair and make it kind to everyone, from the animals to the humans. When we're working on legislation at the federal level, we always say it has to have a human component, because that's the way we'll get it to pass, but also because the food system is all about humans too, and workers. And of course, it has to be bipartisan as well. But yeah, I see someone suffering like that for such an unnecessary product. It breaks my heart.
Yeah, we're going to see if we can get Joe back. Joe, are you there? Okay. As we get Joe back, and maybe he can hear us, he's coming in slowly but surely. Let me read the headline here from a Bloomberg article. And the article says, here's what it says. And this is dated July 24th. So this was just written. U.S. meatpackers don't have many answers for lack of distancing. As part of an investigation into the spread of coronavirus at U.S. meat plants, Democratic Senators Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker released responses from major producers that defended their operations during the pandemic. The four biggest meatpackers, Tyson Food, JBS, Cargill, and Smithfield, pointed to measures such as staggering shifts in sanitation systems, but gave soft responses when it came to implementing social distancing in production areas of the plant where workers are often elbow to elbow. Now, I want to go to the response of Smithfield, which, by the way, is a company that's owned by a Chinese conglomerate. It is not an American-owned company. Smithfield's CEO said in a letter, the plants were not designed to operate in a pandemic, and that the company installed physical barriers where social distancing was impossible for workers. Quote, for better or for worse, our plants are what they are, Sullivan wrote. CEO Sullivan, I don't have his first name. For better or for worse, our plants are what they are, Sullivan wrote. Four walls, engineered design, efficient use of space, spread out. Okay, where? To say it is a challenge is an understatement. Now, here's where I'd really like to get your response. And Joe is back. Fantastic. There he is. Hi, Joe. We're reading about the CEO from Smithfield in a Bloomberg article, who basically tells critics, quote, candidly, we are weary of critics in the media who are detached from the realities of this worldwide pandemic, namely that we must produce food and somebody has to do it, end quote. This is the ultimate duplicity, because the reason we even have world hunger is because of meat. Animals eat. Please turn down, if you have me on, turn down your audio. Because animals eat so much more than they produce as meat or dairy. So, Joe, when you hear a high-minded response like that, a dismissive response from the CEO of Smithfield, who I invite on anytime, I'd love to dialogue with you, Mr. Sullivan. What runs through you, Joe? Joe?
Well, clearly this is very blatant. This is placing profits before workers. They don't care. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
We hear you. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, I mean, yes, clearly workers are not being placed first. Yes, I'm speaking right now. I'm going to try another spot here.
Yes, yes, we hear you. We hear you. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, we got you. Joe. Okay, you know what? I think Joe, the point Joe was making is that he's putting his profits of his company, which is not really even his company, it's a Chinese-owned conglomerate, ahead of the lives of slaughterhouse workers. So would you like to respond to that, Heather?
Yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking that people are not valuing human lives or animal lives. I have a family member who unfortunately works in a slaughterhouse here not too far from me. And so we don't talk about it a lot with him, me being vegan and him working in a slaughterhouse, but it's always a concern that, his employers aren't putting their lives, they're risking their lives to make food that's not essential when we have so many plant-based options that they can be eating.
Yeah. This big lie, I would call it the big lie, Victoria, is that all of this mayhem and this suffering, the depopulation of animals, the slaughter of animals, the illness of the slaughterhouse workers, the destruction of the environment, the pollution of the air, the exploitation of workers, even those who aren't getting sick. The report by Oxfam that these workers are often forced to wear adult diapers because they are given such short breaks. And all of this is justified by saying we've got to produce food when indeed, guess what? You could have 100% plant-based food without having any slaughterhouses in the world, Victoria.
And we are getting there very slowly, but not as slow as it used to be. It's so important for everybody who gets this, for everybody who is eating no animal products or who is well on their way to eating no animal products, to get out there, to be attractive, to let everybody know what your cholesterol numbers are, to show how great your food tastes. We have got to turn meat into the new tobacco. We're on the road, but we're not nearly far enough down that road.
Yeah, and you do quite a bit to make that connection. So when this first started, and there was, frankly, a larger coalition of pre-vegan, not necessarily vegan organizations, and some said, we can't be a part of it at a certain point, which was sad, but typical. The meat industry is a very powerful industry. Let's just face it. Mm-hmm. But you were getting calls from what kind of people? And have you still gotten any calls?
Yeah, well, and Heather actually can answer this better. Heather has her own organization, the Vegan Academy, and she's also a graduate of Main Street Vegan Academy, which I run. And yeah, one of the things we found was we were getting a lot of calls from people who were Spanish speaking, because there were people, it's a highly Latino workforce. And so a lot of these people were wanting to support their relatives. And as time has gone on, we're actually hearing from fewer people, and we consulted a psychologist about this, who said that it's because people are dealing with the kind of angst that is about survival. So they're not looking to give something up, which is why we've got to get out there and show that eating plants is sexy, eating vegan is delicious, it's cool, it's the way to do it. Because that's the only thing right now when people are feeling down, when people are feeling afraid, they're not looking for asceticism. They are looking for something that's fun and something that's cool. And that has to be our message.
Although I think a lot of people, myself included, are trying to use this as a time of transformation. I feel like I've been really cleaning up my act as far as food because, well, as much as I want to eat vegan restaurants open, I'm not going to vegan restaurants where there's all this dessert trays. So I'm eating literally oatmeal and chickpeas and all these things that I should be eating all the time. Finally.
Yeah, okay. But that's your cool. And this is what's so wonderful. So if we're really into health, if somebody's an athlete or maybe a little bit older and concerned about health, they're out there pushing the health. If somebody is young and not thinking about that, it's like, wow, you can have bacon chili cheese dogs. You can have pepperoni pizza. You can have anything you want and do it vegan. We have to be out there on every level, reaching every American and eventually everybody around the world.
Absolutely. We have Joe Enriquez Henry back with us. Joe, I want to get your reaction to the CEO of Smithfield saying, basically, I'm tired of your criticisms. We're providing food. Get real. Get back on planet Earth. First of all, the attitude, and second, the message.
Well, it's extremely blatant disregard for workers at these facilities. Here we are with about 500,000 workers in several hundred plants here in the United States alone who are doing this important work. But the reality is these companies do not care. These companies do not care. They're placing profits before workers. That's why we have the boycott. We're going to demand for justice by having the consumer boycott, urging people to not eat meat of any kind. We have walkouts that have happened as early as 2 weeks ago in Greeley, Colorado. Workers have said enough's enough. We have many activists out there throughout the country and in other countries around the world who are saying an end to this exploitation of workers, of animals, and the exploitation of the environment. So clearly we know what they're thinking. We know that they don't care. That's why we have the civil rights complaint. Again, that's why we have the boycott and the vigils.
Well, let me jump in for 1 second. And how is it going with that civil rights complaint?
Well, that complaint.
What the complaint is, so that those who did not watch last week, because this is big news.
Sure. So a coalition of concerned groups, nonprofits, our group, along with animal rights groups, vegan groups, joined together in a civil rights complaint to the Department of Agriculture in USDA, stating that discrimination has occurred in the workplace at these meatpacking facilities, that the overwhelming majority of workers are people of color who have been exploited. They have been treated differently than the management at these facilities, in that we want these hundreds of millions of dollars that have been provided to these companies through the federal government to end right away, and for these companies to be investigated by the Department of Justice. So those discussions are underway. Unfortunately,
are you talking to the USDA and the Department of Justice?
Yes, we are. And it is being investigated, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen at this point, because we know that the Department of Agriculture is headed up by a Trump appointee. They do have to meet with us. They have to issue a decision. We'll see what happens out. But this has brought visibility. There will be congressional hearings. Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker have asked for an investigation. They sent out a press release last week.
In response to your complaint, was it connected? Wow, that's big. I just want to get a reaction from Laura. That's big, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Getting that sort of engagement on the Hill. Absolutely. I mean, but you've got a great case, and I think people understand that these companies are not acting right, and they're not treating their employees right.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, see, for us in the vegan world, it's always been a challenge to break through to mainstream media. And we've had to do it by hook or by crook. We, for example, held vigils for years outside slaughterhouses. The only time we've ever gotten coverage was when Anita Krines, the founder of the Safe Movement, was arrested and was insulted by the trucker. They're not humans, you dumb bleeping bitch. And then there was a trial. She got coverage for that. When most recently, one of our beloved activists, Reagan Russell, was run down by a slaughter truck as the slaughter truck carrying pigs was about to enter the slaughterhouse. Here's the intersection where it happened, right here. And of course, when people get arrested in large numbers, I was covering many events at, for example, small live markets. And it was only when Direct Action Everywhere had an event where I would say 38 people approximately, including former Baywatch star, got arrested. Then the media showed up and tried to make it look like a circus. So when those kinds of situations occur, you realize the institutions are all biased against us. The media is biased against us. Look at the advertising. It's all meat, dairy, and pharmaceuticals. I'd say 80% of it. But thanks to Joe here, Joe, you broke through. And the way you break through that wall is to talk about worker safety and consumer issues. This is something that has nothing to do, unfortunately, with the animal rights aspect. But you see now, MSNBC, the Rachel Maddow show, and others talking about slaughterhouses. They don't call them slaughterhouses. They call them meatpacking plants.
Right.
But like you're packing a piece of steak for a vacation. But they're slaughterhouses still. People are starting to see it's disrupting the fantasy that somehow there's a Santa Claus that comes with a chicken wing tree and drops a fruit called chicken wings down. All this nonsense, this fantastical lie is starting to be shattered. The New York Times did an entire article showing the layout of slaughterhouses, including the kill floor, and labeling it the word kill, so that those readers also can snap out of denial. So I cannot overestimate how important your complaint is that you're getting U.S. senators and national media. Can you elaborate on how you got Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren to basically applaud your civil rights complaint against the meat industry?
Well, clearly this is about workers and about communities that are being infected right now. So they know that something has to be done. They know that this goes not only from the workers, but also into the communities where many, many people are dying due to these infections, like Chernobyl, these facilities are. So their investigation has uncovered a lot about these virus outbreaks, putting an end to it. This is part of a bigger bill called the HEROES Act, which was first written and proposed and adopted in the U.S. House of Representatives. Now it's in the Senate. It needs to be revised, and we hope that it comes out of the Senate. So this is big news. This is part of a bigger package with the things that we're dealing with due to the virus. So the action is now, and they're on top of it. So we applaud their effort, but at the end of the day, it is going to take the consumer boycott to do the things that need to be done. The way that we impact and change the way in which things are done is through having Americans not buy meat. And we feel that we're building that right now, that support, but more work needs to be done.
Now, I want to bring in some other breaking news, and this is an article in The Intercept, which is an incredible independent media publication, talking about the meat companies' donations to Republican candidates to try to protect themselves from liability. And I just want to read, and by the way, we invite Smithfield or any of these companies on anytime. We'd love to dialogue with you. It says here in this Intercept story that just came out, Smithfield Food has cut campaign checks to the Republican attorneys general seeking civil liability protections for businesses that remained open during the pandemic, and has dispatched company lobbyists to press lawmakers on the issue. So essentially, it's a very long-winded article, but essentially they're giving money to the people who could ultimately decide, Laura, whether these companies have certain levels of immunity from people dying as a result of going in there.
Yeah, I mean, policy, especially at the federal level, but at state levels too, is up for sale to the highest bidder. I mean, that's why we're lobbying. That's why we have hundreds of members supplying a lobbying budget that we use every month, and we're just growing and growing, is because we need to be there whispering in the ears of congressmen in opposition to the meat industry, which is just kind of having a free run. Like you mentioned, Jane, we got to try many different modes and many different ideas for getting the message across. And I think vegans have been really good at the individual one-on-one outreach and pretty good at the corporate convincing corporations that plant-based is the way to go for a lot of things. There's been a lot of innovation there. We need a full court press politically. And Joe, I'm just being in coalition with you is just an absolute honor, and we need to do more of this, because the more we work together politically at the federal and at the state levels and talk to politicians, they're not horrible people. We just need to talk to them. And so, like, we have all these, like Jane was mentioning, we can do demonstrations, and that's great for individual public awareness. But sometimes we just need to walk into the State House, and we have to walk into Capitol Hill and call the meetings with the legislators and make our case. And all of us can do that.
Absolutely. I want to say here, the American Farm Bureau Federation, which represents a range of animal agriculture interests, has also pushed Congress to include liability waivers in the next round of legislative relief for the current crisis. Basically, you go to work for me, you die. Sorry, it's not my fault. It's not my problem. Joe, to me, it would seem the best way to fight that, since they're saying in the next round of legislative relief, which could be any day now, is to get Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren aware of the Intercept report and say, you've got to stop this liability relief for the meatpacking industry, and look where they're donating to.
Well, clearly, yes. And what we're doing, and I failed to bring this up beforehand, this Thursday, July 30th, we're phone calling U.S. senators all across the country right now to urge them to act on the legislation that's there in the Senate to get that passed, which is similar to the HEROES bill in the House, which has a worker protection element to it, which addresses the plight of workers in these slaughterhouses. So those phone calls are happening. Many coalition members are getting involved on that. We're doing social media. Protest vigils are happening across the country. But clearly, as mentioned, is we have to get to the senators right now. This is a very important week to get bills passed, to get more funding going.
But I would think that those who are capable of making national news, like Elizabeth Warren, who is being considered as a potential vice presidential running mate for Joe Biden, as well as Cory Booker, who's a former presidential candidate, in one fell swoop, they could certainly get the headlines to let people know. I mean, The Intercept is a great journalistic enterprise, but it's not the Washington Post or the New York Times or CNN or MSNBC. I mean, even by mentioning this is essentially saying, give us a way to wash our hands of everybody dying and getting sick in these slaughterhouses. And we're going to use the excuse that it's to feed America, when we've already explained why that's nothing could be further from the truth. Additionally, they were exporting meat. They've been exporting meat during this crisis overseas. So right there, it's not about feeding America. Okay. That is just something I think that needs to be shattered. Somebody needs to shatter that, because I remember a long time ago, this is a global excuse, where we disrupted a visit by the foreign minister, I believe, of Australia, who was pushing the live exports from Australia, horror ships out of a Hitchcock, nightmare. It's one of the most horrific things, sending tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of sheep or whatever across in terrible heat in their own feces. It's something that you can't even believe belongs in a medieval torture museum. And her response to me, when I actually cornered her and spoke to her, was, well, we're providing protein to the developing world, and walked off. And I was like, it's not necessary to kill animals to give protein. Kale has more protein than steak, but she was gone.
But, yeah, and Jane, yes, Jane, you're correct. I mean, these companies should not be protected by the federal government from lawsuits, any legal action. So what's happening in the Senate again this week will hopefully prevent them from having that protection. Now, at the same time, it's very important to note that in states like in Iowa and Nebraska, lawsuits are being filed against those states, those governments, for protecting and not providing information on the infection rate that is happening in those states. In Iowa, for example, the governor has not worked with the CDC to report COVID-19 outbreaks at meatpacking plants. So lawsuits are being put forth right now to say enough's enough. You cannot hide this information. It's important for workers. It's important for communities. So you see a lot of things happening.
While we're talking, it just came over. Breaking news: GOP releases coronavirus relief proposal after delay. So Republicans and Democrats will seek to reach an agreement on unemployment and funding for schools testing. I don't know if this is the bill specifically that would supposedly have an add-on that would provide liability, but that would seem to be the most important thing to stop, because these people should not be deprived of the right to sue.
Jane, you're right, and they should not, and that's why this week, in what they're discussing, they're trying to keep out important legislation in what they're trying to pass. But we need that elements of legislation, the worker protection elements, which also would allow individuals to sue these companies to hold them accountable, to take away that protection. So again, those phone calls are being made to senators across the country, especially on Thursday, to urge them to do the right thing.
Well, where do we get this number? What number do we call? Where do we go to boycottmeat.com and get this?
You will see it on Boycott Meat. We have a video on that. You'll see a video on Forward Latino that gives the phone number of calling your U.S. Senator. That phone number on forwardlatino.org and also on their Forward Latino Facebook page.
Yeah,
but we'll put it on yours too.
Yeah, it has to be on Boycott Meat as well. Call Boycott Meat. Yeah, I mean, this is, we all have to make this call. This is like, there's nothing more important than to have that. If you don't want to email Boycott Meat, you can just go to Boycott Meat and just Boycott Meat. Go there. That's all I can say right now. Boycott Meat. Okay. Now, let me ask you one other question. We're all boycotting meat for the last, I don't know how many decades. We're vegans. That's automatic boycott meat. By the way, one of our contributors at Jane on Jane came up with, I think, an equally good slogan, which maybe at some point we want to move into another slogan: skip meat. Skip meat. Because it's like, it really just requires a very small rearrangement of one's diet, Heather. This is not, you don't have to have a whole lifestyle change and become a monk and, sit on the floor and throw out
meditate
modern appliances. All you have to do is just make a little change. And if you were going to have a burger, have a plant-based burger, or you could have fish, you could have Gardein fish cakes. I mean, it's pretty easy these days.
Right. And that's one of the things that I tell people when they're looking to make the switch to eat less meat or eat no meat. Take what you have already, take what you eat already, and just don't put meat in it. So if you're going to have spaghetti with meat sauce, just have spaghetti with marinara sauce. There's vegan meats available if you feel like you want to have that texture in there, or throw some mushrooms in there, throw some olives in there. Just take the meat out. You don't need to replace it with anything, or just add some, if you're going to have a bean burrito, throw some beans in there.
We've got more breaking news just out from agriculture.com. Business news: COVID-19 cases appear to be slowing at meat plants, but companies are not releasing test results. Okay. And it says, this is the agriculture.com site. Since the pandemic began, Fern, which I guess is the organization here, one of the organizations, has counted 37,000 cases and 168 deaths among meat packing workers. Right. 37,000 cases, Joe.
Yes, and it's going to continue to grow. And, I totally do not agree with the statement that things are slowing down as far as the virus goes. We're talking with workers every day now, and they're telling us about how they're feeling ill, how they're those who have had the virus, who went back to work after recovery, are now feeling the symptoms again of the virus. And again, the workplaces are very unsafe. There's no ventilation. There's no 6-foot distancing. So this virus is spreading, but these state governors, only 22 states are reporting the infection rate at meatpacking plants. So we need the other states to do the same reporting to the CDC. So that is what we're pushing right now. That's what the lawsuits are about. Again, the only thing that's flatlining is the amount of information that's being disclosed by state governments who refuse to work with the CDC. So again, that's why we need the consumer boycott. So we are going to be urging more consumers. And again, like we talked about before, we're going to have to do a secondary boycott. We're going to have to do a chain grocery store, something really big where we impact their bottom line so that they can put pressure on these slaughterhouses.
So every time we have one of these, we just hit so many topics. It's like we're just scratching the surface. You can see how complicated this issue is. We're about to wrap up. Just final thoughts from everyone. But wow, we've really got to, I think, start making these calls and be involved with getting people to make the calls. And you can go to boycottmeat.com. Hopefully, Joe, right after this, you'll put it up there. And
yes.
It's slowing down, says one critic, because they are not reporting. It's the same mentality of the administration saying, let's stop reporting and testing because then it'll, and it's almost like, so then it'll appear as if it's going away. Meanwhile, it's skyrocketing. This thing is out of control. And anybody who underestimates it and says, I can ignore it, I'm special, I call it the my dog doesn't have fleas syndrome. Oh, I can't get it. Just like my dog can't, get fleas because it's my dog, because he's my dog. No, there are people who have been COVID deniers who've called it a hoax. Every day I read another article of XYZ COVID deniers hospitalized. In the Trump administration, a top aide has tested positive for COVID. So did the president's son's girlfriend. I mean, how can you deny it? And then to say that there's nothing to see here when it comes to the meatpacking plants, it's essentially saying, and we'll wrap it up here, Joe, that these workers don't count. And this is the same attitude that they have toward the animals. Their suffering does not count. And before anybody gets their nose out of shape because we're comparing humans to animals, there is no insult to talk about commonalities in experience. We're all earthlings. And that's the whole point of the animal rights movement, is that their suffering counts, all suffering counts, and that the source of all evil is the assumption that some suffering doesn't count. And now it's extending not just to the animals being slaughtered in these plants, but the people who are at the lowest rung of the economic order who are being forced to kill them. Joe.
Yeah, well, Jane, again, every family is going to be impacted due to the virus, and every family is going to be aware that the virus is being incubated in these plants. So clearly, especially here in the Midwest, where we have many of these slaughterhouses, the news is always going to be there about these communities where the outbreaks are happening, where not only workers, but their families, the communities, hospitals are going to be filled up. So this is going to be an ongoing discussion. It's going to be news. We're going to be talking about it, and we are going to provide more information through boycottmeat.org. And through your discussions, thank you very much for having us to have these continued discussions. And again, many young people already understand the importance of not eating meat, and they also want to become active in this effort. So thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, this is a political issue where these workers are being falsely described as essential workers so they can be shoved into these COVID-infested plants, and they are obviously not essential workers. They're essential people, but they're not essential workers. Okay, next up, how about Victoria Moran?
Hey, Do your dharma. That's a term in yoga and Buddhism that is your specific duty. It's almost like your mission if you choose to accept it. So just go into yourself, find out what lights me up. Do I need a sign? Do I need to be at a visual? Do I need to be making calls? Do I need to be cooking for people? Do I need to be on Zoom teaching classes? Whatever it is that is going to bring this change about, you are an expert at some part of it.
All right,
so do that,
Heather.
and we'll get it done.
Yeah, and you don't have to go it alone. We have a group of at least 50 lifestyle vegan coaches, myself included, who are here to help people who are wanting to boycott meat. Go to boycottmeat.com, click on the coaching link, and ask us a question. Let us help you make that switch to taking meat off your plate.
All right, and Laura.
So at Agriculture Fairness Alliance, we will reproduce what you put on boycottmeat.com, Joe, and we'll make sure that all our members see the calls to action you're calling for. I just want to add to the idea that to help people skip meat, there are things we could do at policy levels too. For example, we've been talking about the at-risk farmer program, which is our keystone legislation, but we also have a whole host of legislative priorities that our AFA members know about because they take a poll and tell us what they care about. And one of those is to improve the SNAP program to make plant-based proteins more accessible, especially to teens and disaffected youth who maybe aren't getting access to vegan meals because their parents don't get it. Just as an example, like Victoria was saying, there are so many things we can be doing. Find the thing that you can do. If you want to come join us at AFA, you're welcome to, and just get going. And it's been an honor to be on here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Jane.
Oh,
and Joe, thank you for your work. Fantastic.
Yeah, and it's such an honor to confab with all of you because we need all of you to sign up to the website boycottmeat.com so we can add you to the coalition, which is growing longer and longer. And I think that the key is making these calls. And we've got to get, I'll do some more on that, Joe, to get people to make those calls because that's absolutely crucial. And we'll hit them on, what day is it? It's Thursday, right? So this Thursday, we got to make those calls. And we got to tell them exactly what bill to ask for. What bill, what part of the bill, like what number and all of that. So thank you so much. This coalition is fantastic. We're going to add your organizations to the Boycott Meat Coalition, and we will have you back soon. We're going to do it. Let's do it.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.